Working with teams, conflict comes up a lot. So what's the most common question you get around that from people that you work with?
Yeah, it is a hot topic, conflict, obviously. And I do segments, I talk about conflict with teams. Always after that, there's always somebody to come back and say, yeah, that's great, these tools to help with conflict, but what if the other person is the problem? What if the other person is that toxic no person? They're not willing to try or come to the table, and I'll show up like that, but it's not me that's the problem, it's this other person.
So what is your advice in that situation?
It's a very difficult conversation, I think, to navigate with somebody else where that is the dynamic, that I'm willing to show up and make this better, but this person is stonewall, they're not interested. And I really think there's a conversation that is authentic to go and sit down with that person in cold blood, not while something happens and while I'm upset or in a like emotionally volatile state, but to sit down with that person and say, hey, the way that things are between us, like, does this work for you? Do you enjoy this? Because I don't love how things feel, and I think that they could be improved. And it doesn't mean that we have to become best friends together, but I think that this situation could be made better and that there's a way to like work through this together. And that conversation takes a lot of courage, because if I'm really think that you're the problem, but I'm willing to come in and sit down and say, hey, what is the experience you're having? Just tell me what's happening here for you, and I'm willing to listen. You have to go into that conversation being willing to hear stuff that you don't want to hear, that you don't like. You're gonna hear things that about yourself that you disagree with, or this person's experience that is a very different perspective than you have of the situation, and being willing to have the courage to hear those things and not have to defend them or prove that person wrong, but just to acknowledge and learn, this is your experience and I hear that. I hear where you're coming from, and being willing to own my contribution to that. Because even if I think I'm showing up in that situation 100% squeaky clean, that's not that person's experience. And so be willing to hear those things without defending, and just saying, all right, I hear that. I'm willing to like contribute to this situation in a different way. And are you open to hearing my experience here? Because I think this for both of us could be better. And it goes back to what we talked about before of like, we're not trying to win at conflict. Me and you having this conflict isn't about me getting what I want and you not. It is the two of us versus this problem. And if the problem is that we don't really like each other or have a very different working styles or communication styles, how can we solve that? How can we still navigate this despite this issue? And it's the two of us against that instead of me against you. We're talking at the deepest heart of emotional intelligence is the willingness to be vulnerable and courageous and have that conversation in a real, authentic way and say, hey, I'm not right here. I'm willing to hear something that I disagree with, that is different than my experience, and acknowledge that and contribute in a better way. It's so challenging, but I think that is the most common thing that comes up. And it's worth doing. It's so worth having the conversation with somebody to just be like, let's make this better. And starting with me, I will listen, you go first. I'm willing to contribute to this in a better way.